Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the County Planning Committee taking place today, Tuesday, the 7th of February 2023. My name is Councillor Alan Bell and I am chairing today's meeting. The meeting is being broadcast live through our YouTube channel. Before we commence with today's formal business, I would like to cover some of the housekeeping issues for us all to follow. Could I ask everyone to switch off or make silent their mobile phones, please? Please keep microphones switched on at all times, unless invited to speak by the chair. When invited to speak, please could you switch on the microphone nearest to you and introduce yourself. We have a number of officers with us this morning, which I will now ask to introduce ourselves, starting with Kirsty Charlton to my right.
Kirsty Charlton, Committee Services.
Neil Carter, I'm the solicitor to the committee.
Stephen Reid, Planning Manager.
Chris Shale, Senior Planning Officer.
Claire Teasdale, Principal Planning Officer.
Louisa Olivier, Senior Planning Officer.
Phil Harrison, Highways. Jarvis Robinson, Highways.
Thank you, everybody. Moving on to the agenda. First item is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence for today's meeting?
Councillors Richardson, Roberts and Simpson.
Item 2 is substitute members. Do we have any substitute members in attendance?
Chair, can we have the lights switched on?
Thank you, Patricia, for that one. Could you not see us? Whilst we're waiting for them to come on, moving on to item 3 is declarations. Thank you, Kirsty. Declarations of interest. Does any members have a declaration of interest on business on today's agenda? Yes, Carl?
Chair, just to, for the benefit of clarity and transparency, item 5A, the developers known to us, but I have not made any sort of views on this application and I've got an open mind based on what I hear this morning.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much, Carl. And same myself, for transparency and openness, I also had met and spoke to the agent for this first application, but again, I remained impartial and come to this meeting with an open mind. Item number 4. Sorry, Kevin.
Just to put on the same basis, I've been the secretary of the Shotley Bridge Hospital Support Group for 15 years. So I guess that probably makes me a little bit partisan on hospitals.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Kevin. And same as we go through the meeting, if anybody realises I haven't declared interest, just feel free to speak up. Sorry, yeah, go back to substitutes. We just missed that one as Kirsty was the remainder of chair.
Yeah, we've got Councillor McLean for Councillor Roberts and Councillor Peake for Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Kirsty. Item number 4 is minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of February 2023. Can we agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of February 2023? Agreed. Item number 5 is applications to be determined. The first one is 5A, it's the land east of Edge, Maiden Law. It's installation operation of a ground-mounted photovoltaic PV solar energy generation system, a solar farm, battery storage facility, electrical substation and associated infrastructure. We have 8 speakers registered to speak for this item, and I'll ask Officer Chris Shields, Senior Planning Officer, to present the report.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick update first to your reports. At paragraph 177, it stated that although the development would temporarily remove a significant portion of land from arable use, it would still be available for low-intensity grazing. That should read as pasture rather than arable, as the majority site is in pastoral use. Okay, the site is located on approximately 92 hectares of land between the settlements of Burnhope to the south, Maidenlaw to the northeast, and Lanchester to the west down here. Sorry, the northwest is Maidenlaw. You can see the outline of the site in red on the plan. It's the land here, and then it spreads south towards Burnhope, again to Edge Lane there, and then further north on Green Lane and that area there, and then it would be connected via Edge Lane and then along to the existing substation up towards the Morrison Busty depot. This is an aerial photograph of the site. You can see it more clearly that the land that it will be based on this plan. You can see the areas of plantation and woodland around the site that would be avoided. And you can also see on this photograph the existing solar farms towards Greencroft and the council's own solar farm on the Morrison Busty depot to the north there. This is the indication of the site layout. The blue areas where the solar panels would be constructed. In this area here, you've got the infrastructure, the batteries and substation, etc. And then again, the wire heading north to the existing substation. The access to site for construction would be from Edge Lane. Then once constructed, the maintenance access would be from Green Lane to the east. The areas in green would be new planting in areas for wildlife mitigation. And this area to the east over here, that was originally part of the development to have solar panels on, and that's been drawn back through amendments to the scheme. So this is a photograph of the construction site access from Edge Lane, which was formerly used by the Chapman's Well Open Cast here. It's also a public right-of-way. So this would be firmed up, tarmacked for the entrance. And that would be in use for the 5 to 6 months while the development's being constructed. This is the Green Lane entrance, which would just be for maintenance, which is just once every month or so a van would come and check on the site. This is a view of the northern area of the site. As I said, currently used for pasture, grazing land. The central area looking towards, go back to the plan, so we're looking from the east here towards the west. That was that photograph. I said the northern area where the cows were shown is in this plot here. And then this is the southern area of the site, and that is in this area here. And again, that's from Edge Lane looking across the site. And there'll be new tree planting against Edge Lane here. So we've had no objections from statutory or internal consultees, subject conditions where appropriate. Landscape officers and rights-of-way officers have raised concerns regarding the impact that the development would have to the aesthetic and recreational value of public rights-of-way within the site. Burnhope Parish Council objects to the scale, impact on local residents, wildlife and agricultural land, the loss of connectivity for wildlife, potential loss of public footpaths, lack of evidence for job creation and insufficient planning gain are also raised as concerns. Greencroft Parish Council objects as they consider the site not to be suitable for a solar farm and that agricultural land should be used as a last resort for this type of use. The land should be preserved for food production and the benefit of local residents. In response to consultation, we received 466 letters of public objection. The main issues include the impact on landscape and public rights-of-way, scale of the development being too large, harm to biodiversity, loss of agricultural land and food production, impact to residential amenity, inefficiency of solar panels, impact to house prices and insufficient community fund. We also received response from Councillor Oliver, objecting due to the scale and impact on the village, wildlife and walking routes. The Council for the Protection of Rural England has objected due to the loss of agricultural land and the impact to landscape and rights-of-way. The Royal Society for the Protection of Birds have objected due to the potential impact to priority bird species and a lack of mitigation. And Durham Wildlife Trust have objected due to the lack of mitigation for breeding birds. Now, just to point out to those last three there, their objections came in before the additional mitigation was put in for the birds, as identified on this plan, the green area down here. And following reconsultation, they didn't raise any further comments. In support of the scheme, we've received 19 letters of support. The majority of the letters cite renewable energy to be the main benefit, but has also been stated by landowners that the poor soil structure is unsuitable for arable crops, and animals that are being kept on the site have been scared by dogs and fences cut, allowing livestock to escape. Conclusion, the provision of a significant renewable energy source, providing clean energy to over 13,861 homes, reducing dependence on fossil fuel power stations with additional employment benefits, as well as biodiversity and landscape improvements. Although changes have been made to the proposed solar farm during the course of consideration of the application, it would still constitute development in the countryside, resulting in harm to the landscape and rights of way. All of the material considerations have been taken into account in the determination of the solar farm application and found to be acceptable. Whilst it is accepted that the proposed solar farm would have an impact to the landscape and rights of way, it is considered that the benefits of the development in terms of energy supply and security, support for renewable energy, biodiversity enhancement and job creation would outweigh that harm in accordance with CDP Policy 33. Proposals have generated significant public interest, with concerns expressed regarding the proposals having been taken into account and carefully balanced against the scheme's wider social, economic and public benefits. The proposed development is considered to broadly accord with the relevant policies of the County Durham Plan and relevant sections of the NPPF. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for that brilliant report. Now we move on to the Redchester speakers to address the committee. First of all, local members. We have representation. Unfortunately, Councillor Mike McGaughan couldn't attend this morning due to other commitments, but he has sent in documentation and out the clerk because he is going to read that out.
Ask the officer a question
Be
at this point, that presentation that we've got written in our report.
after the speakers, if that's okay, Patricia. Yeah, thank you.
This is a statement from Mike McGaughan. First of all, can I state that I'm pro-environmental and renewable development. However, as a local councillor, I also know more than most how my residents feel regarding this application. The 466 listed objections clearly show how the residents, those who will be directly affected by this application, feel about this huge solar development. I object to this application on the following grounds. 1. NPPF 12. The presumption in favour of sustainable development does not change the statutory status of the development plan as the starting point for decision making. I believe that on this occasion it does not sit with the County Durham plan, therefore this planning application conflicts with the CDP, and as such permission should not be granted. There are no material considerations in this particular case which indicate that this application forms part of the CDP or is required. The report makes no mention of the development of this area, therefore this application should be rejected on these grounds alone. Paragraph 5.399 of the County Durham Plan covers the conserving and enhancing the natural and historic environment. It talks about the environment and well-being, stating that they are fundamental to the quality of life of the people who live and work in the county and to the success of its economy. Environmental considerations are therefore fundamental to all policy areas addressed in the plan. Paragraph 5.4 of the County Durham Plan talks about the wealth of attractive natural and historic assets and goes on to say that across the county, development pressures must not compromise the natural and historic assets that make them attractive and valuable. 3. Paragraph 5.401 of the County Durham Plan talks about the National Planning Policy Framework, stating that planning policies should contribute to and enhance the natural and local environment, recognise the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside, seek to protect and enhance valued landscapes, minimise impacts on and providing net gains for biodiversity, and reduce the risks of pollution, land instability and contamination. This application goes against all of the above. 4, paragraph 5.403 of the County Durham Plan mentions the strategy which relates to the actions that this council is committed to undertaking, including the adoption of conservation area character. 5, planning applications are normally decided on whether or not the application promotes an effective use of the land. On this occasion, it does not. This application dwarfs anything in its surrounding area. It's nearly 3 times the size of the local village of Burnhope. It fails to safeguard the current wildlife and nature walks, and also fails to ensure safe and healthy living. If this application were to be granted, then it would remove the only safe walking area for the villagers, young and old alike. This application fails to encourage or promote any benefits to the community other than relatively limited financial benefits, which Doug will allude to later. The area which this application covers is accessed by walkers and wildlife alike. It has been used by local residents for many decades and forms one of the few safe areas for horse riders, dog walkers and families. This application actually causes harm to a local site of importance for biodiversity. The aesthetic impact on the local area will be quite devastating. Having 6-foot-high metal fences will have a detrimental impact on the local area for generations to come. This will have a direct impact on the health and well-being of the residents who use this area a lot to reflect and gain positive thinking in this lovely, natural, healthy, green space. Whilst these type of applications are considered as a standalone application, it should also be mentioned that another application of the same size by a different company has submitted. They are only separated by a 12-foot wide road between them. They would form the largest solar farm in the whole of the United Kingdom. On balance, it cannot be accepted within the scope of the County Durham Plan, and as such, I ask the committee to refuse this application.
Thank you, Kirsty, and also thank you to Councillor Mike McGaughan for that local, comprehensive view of his area. Next speaker we have on here is Councillor Doug Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. My name is Douglas Oliver, so I represent the Lanchester Division, but that includes all of Burnhope, all of Maidenlaw and all of the land in this application and illustrated on the map above. So following on from Mike's comments, I'd absolutely like to acknowledge the green energy benefits of the application, but sitting as I do on another planning application, we always recognise as committee members the value of the emphasis on balance, and in this particular case I don't feel I can say as local member there is enough consideration of the local community benefit, and we've already heard in the presentation the officers themselves acknowledge the aesthetic impact of the application, and I think and that's obviously something that Mike's spoken about, but it's also illustrated by the large number of residents we have here today to spectate and I believe to speak, but also the 466 objections. So, as I say, balance is crucial, and I do recognise that there are benefits to the application. However, the particular community benefits of £500,000 over 40 years, whilst it might sound significant given the scale of the site and the huge amount of revenue that will be accrued, I feel is not significantly generous. And this is something that Mike and I have raised with the applicant in the past year or so since this was first suggested. We know, for example, that other sites in the county have been more generous. For example, the Aura application at Hawthorne was looking at a package of significantly more of £700,000 over 30 years. But more broadly across the policy space, I think there is a sense that more needs to be done for local communities in terms of benefit with this sort of application. I know the Scottish Government, for example, is looking at, has recommended in the past, benefits of approximately £5,000 per megawatt per year, which in this calculating the £500,000 we're referring to is only about, this would only be about £250 per megawatt per annum by my calculations. I know some of the counties in the south of England, like Dorset and Cornwall, have negotiated deals of around £2,000 or £3,000. So, I mean, others will speak, and Mike has already explained the local impact, but I think without a bigger local positive, it's hard to get that benefit right. So, whilst I recognise the energy situation we're in more broadly, I think the local benefit needs to be considered as well, and it's not something as a local member I would support at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug, for that, and really appreciate again the local knowledge that you give over. Next on the list, we have 4 Rochester speakers to speak on this item. I've agreed to allow them each 4 minutes each. However, I think there may have been a change around. I'm going to ask, we have Professor Reg Jordan. Were you giving your time up, Reg, to another speaker? Or?
Yes, sir. I'm giving my time up to Ian Galloway.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you, Reg. And on the next in line to speak, we have Richard Davis. And Richard, I believe you're taking 4 minutes to speak.
Sorry, could you just repeat that last thing?
4 minutes, yeah. Is that okay?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I wish to make several comments regarding this application. Firstly, I really strongly object to it. It's a massive project. It's going to cover 200 acres. That's 143 football pitches. I estimate it's around 170,000 solar panels. That's a lot. It will move straight into the top 10 largest solar farms in the UK. And that's not really an accolade that County Durham needs. I only heard of this meeting from my wife, who found out from Facebook, and yet we only live 1.5 kilometres from the site in Lanchester. As far as I'm aware, nobody in Lanchester has been notified by the planning department, and yet many residents travel past the site every day and will be affected by the proposed changes. If the Lanchester residents were aware, then there would be easily double the number of complaints. In the committee report on page 1, section 3, it states there are no other national or local landscape designations within 3 kilometres of the proposed site. This is untrue. There are 2 conservation areas within 1.5 miles of the site, one in Lanchester where I live and one in Anfield Plain. Conservation areas and solar farms do not go well together. Edge Lane, which forms the boundary of the proposed development, is also the Lanchester parish boundary, and this falls within the Lanchester neighbourhood plan. When I stand on the Lanchester side of the road, the development opposite will breach local objective 4, covering green spaces. This is to protect and enhance the attractive rural setting. The application will destroy the rural setting of Burnhope and of Lanchester. Sustainable development is a development which meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. The installation of solar panels on agricultural land cannot be called sustainable. The land must be extensively excavated for the installation, destroying its agricultural use. The panels will most likely be made in China and travel half the world to get here. These panels have an effective lifespan of only 25 years. They will then need to be replaced and disposed of by our future generations. The panels are classified as hazardous waste. They may end up in a landfill site in County Durham. In the committee report before you, point 31, relating to the Durham County Council Plan Policy number 10, it states, development in the countryside will not be permitted. It clarifies that with certain exceptions. This development doesn't meet the criteria for these exceptions, specifically the exceptions for economic criteria or the infrastructure development.
1 minute remaining.
Policy 39 covers landscape. As already mentioned, this development will cause unacceptable harm to the character and quality of the landscape. Light Source has offered mitigating measures to comprise hedgerows and trees. In my experience, these take much longer than 5 years to grow. It's a poor mitigation attempt. Hedges are not good at hiding a development of this scale, especially in winter. The solar panel farm at Greencroft is completely surrounded by thick woodland. This one will not be. It is visible to every road user passing by every day for 40 years. In summary, nearly all the local residents do not wish solar panels to be sited here. Most will not have read the Durham County Council plan, but they instinctively know that the plan is designed to prevent such large-scale developments in Durham countryside, and they are trusting in you, the committee, to reject the application. I ask each of you, please, to reject this application as it benefits fall a long, long way short of the harms incurred. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard, for that. Next speaker we have is Mr. Ian Galloway. And Ian, you have up to 8 minutes to speak. Over to you, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to the committee. I am a trustee and treasurer of Burnhope Community Centre. 466 objections, largely from local residents. I urge you to hear their voices and refuse this application that will devastate our community. I'm asking that the application be refused on the grounds of unacceptable landscape and visual impact, contrary to Policy 10, Development in the Countryside, and Policy 39, Landscape of the County Durham Plan, just as you refused almost identical applications at Het and at Merton last year. The impacts on Burnhope will not be outweighed by the benefits of this scheme. This application is also contrary to Policy 26, Green Infrastructure of the Durham Plan, where development is expected to protect the green infrastructure network. Now, we are not NIMBYs. We fully support renewable energy, but this industrial scale development is 2.5 times the size of our village and will destroy what has been decades in the making. Section 2 of the NPPF requires us to achieve sustainable development with economic, social and environmental objectives being pursued in mutually supportive ways. And Section 8 says that planning policies should aim to achieve healthy places. After enduring decades of mining, so much good work has been done by the county to make Burnhope a healthy place to live. Studies in social prescribing show that regular walks in nature have massive health benefits. Getting into green spaces and engaging with nature is good for us all. But Burnhope is at the top of a steep hill, and all the roads from the village don't have any footpaths. It is impossible for residents to walk safely for their health, other than through all the fields which will be taken out by this development. There is literally nowhere else to walk from the village if you are elderly, have young children, or have mobility problems. So this application condemns the elderly and disabled to walking on narrow paths surrounded by 2-metre-high fences, staring at row upon row of black glass and steel. It'll be like walking in a prison yard. Now, BP planned to plant some hedges, but as you know, these take many years to establish, and you can see straight through a hedge for 6 months of the year in Burnhope. So the application will have a negative economic impact because of the increasing cost to the NHS and other services brought about by this devastating effect on health and well-being to the residents of Burnhope. And we have all worked so hard to make our community a thriving and successful place to live and to increase the health and well-being of our residents. And all our efforts are going to be totally compromised and destroyed. Our community deserves better. This proposal is not sustainable, and I urge you to refuse it. Along with the effect on our health, there'll be a serious impact on food production. The UK imports over 1/3 of the food we eat, and this is increasing, and recent events have shown us it's not sustainable. But we are losing over 100,000 acres of land every year to these kind of developments. At the same time, yields are declining because of climate change. If this carries on, tomatoes will be just the beginning. The fields in the proposed site are grade 3B and 4, which the government class as very suitable for grass and grazing or harvesting most of the year. And the land is also certified organic, with organic farmers and growers. And our need for energy security has to be balanced with our need for food security. The CPRE have objected to this application, and they state that there are 250,000 hectares of south-facing commercial roof space, enough to meet half the UK's electricity demand, not to mention domestic roof space and surface car parks that can be harnessed for solar with limited impact on landscape. I urge you to refuse this application. The application will also have a devastating impact on wildlife. The biodiversity index will increase, but that will be through planting more hedges and grasses. We already have hedges and grasses. What we will lose is what we treasure: the curlews, the lapwings, the skylarks, the migrating geese, and the deer. Most of these are already classified by the RSPB as a near-threatened species, which is why they objected to the application. The developer is promising some mitigation areas, but these simply won't work because they have no relationship to the nature ponds. And no further comments were made because no further comments were needed when the amendments proposed are so insignificant. Please protect our wildlife. I urge you to refuse the application. Our final two concerns are about safety and efficiency. There are significant safety issues regarding the use of lithium-ion batteries, which are being used for massive scale for battery storage. The proposed battery storage unit will be built next to Nature's Edge Nature Reserve. The risk is of serious fire. In the last 3 years, there have been 38 fires at battery energy storage depots around the world. And Lion batteries can fail by thermal runaway, where overheating in a single faulty cell propagates to its neighbours with energy releases popularly known as battery fires. These are not strictly fires at all, requiring no oxygen to propagate. They are uncontrollable, and our fire brigade has no training or means to contain them. They create toxic gases, and the resulting pollution will kill everything in the nature pond and beyond. Finally, efficiency. This application industrialises 91 hectares of farmland, and the developer states it will produce 51,000 megawatts of electricity each year from a power capacity of 49.9 megawatts. That means the panels are working at 11.8% efficiency.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Normal for solar panels. That's equivalent to them working on full power for just 2 hours and 50 minutes each day. The proposal means that we will lose all this amenity and all this land for less electricity than is generated by one wind turbine in the North Sea. The latest wind turbine, the Haliade X, generates 74,000 megawatts of gross annual production because it operates at 60% efficiency. This is a very inefficient use of our precious resource, and we urge you to refuse the application.
Thank you very much for that, Ian. Next speaker on the list is Ian Wilkinson. Ian, you have 4 minutes. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Obviously, my name is Ian Wilkinson. I'm a resident in the northeastern section of the site. My house literally is over the fence to where this proposal has been targeted.
Ian, could you just pull the microphone a bit nearer, please?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay, thank you.
First of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to address your committee. The area in question has already been devastated by industrial activity in the past. Once this ceased, Durham County Council and the Coal Board and other stakeholders transformed the land to what any community would love to have on their doorstep. We commend them for their forward thinking. We now have well-managed farmland, currently crucial to our food production needs at this current time, supported by subsidies due to its importance. The new ELMS scheme will support this in the future, which also supports the natural world around it, set out in the new Environmental Plan 2023. We now have areas set aside to enable nature, in particular its wildlife, to flourish, creating environments for it to thrive. By doing this, it is protecting the birds and the red and amber listed which feed on and breed on the area, and supports the legally protected amphibians in the area along with other species. We have a network of accessible public rights-of-way well maintained by Durham County Council, interlinking villages, providing safe, usable pathways and views of the stunning landscape. We have an area where people visit and enjoy in a variety of ways, from walking to horse riding, all essential to good mental health and general physical well-being. Durham County Council proudly promotes our local natural environment through leaflets, signage and through its Durham County newspaper to its residents. The comments and opinions of hundreds of residents of County Durham, county councillors, health services and parish councillors are quite clear. They do not want this area altered in any way, shape or form. Organisations such as the RSPB, Durham County Wildlife Trust and the CPRE are totally against it, who highlight how importantly it goes against both local and national policies on many fronts. My fellow speakers against have highlighted other major material considerations why this development should be refused. It also goes completely against the new Environmental Development Plan updated by the government in February of this year, which states, "We will conserve and enhance the beauty of our natural environment, making sure that there are high quality, accessible, natural close spaces close to where people live and work, and encourage more people to spend time in them in benefit for their health and well-being." On a personal level,
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. On a personal level, I retired on the day this proposal dropped on my mat. After serving the county of Durham for many years, I thought I would have found my perfect, happy place to enjoy my retirement, as many others who live and have recently moved into the area. Please do not allow this development, which will have such a serious and detrimental adverse impact on our lives and everyone's future. Let us not make the same mistakes our ancestors of the past made, but make our ancestors of the future proud of our stance. Please vote to refuse this application. Thank you.
Again, many thanks, Ian, for your comments there. We now move over to the supporters of the application. We have 3 registered supporters. The applicant will have 6 minutes and the 2 landowners will have 5 minutes each. First one is Chris Atkinson, who's the applicant. Over to you, Chris.
Chair, members, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Chris Atkinson and I'm a Principal Environmental Planner at Lightsource BP. The UK Government have published a net zero strategy which seeks to provide a fully decarbonised energy system by 2035. The strategy is clear that to achieve these goals, the deployment of renewable energy at scale and at speed is critical. In 2019, Durham County Council took the laudable step of declaring a climate emergency, in which they stated immediate action is critical if we are to avoid the worst impacts of this climate emergency. It is important that we look at and address the issues in our area to reduce our contribution to this international crisis. Members of the Planning Committee have an opportunity to support this development and make a significant contribution towards achieving the goals set out within the Council's Climate Emergency Action Plan. The proposed solar farm will provide enough energy to power nearly 14,000 homes with green energy. This issue has become particularly pressing as gas prices are at an all-time high due to our reliance on imported energy, leading to huge increases in energy bills. The development of solar farms such as this will help to increase our energy independence, and solar has the advantage of being the cheapest form of energy as well as the quickest to deploy. A key factor in the location of solar farms is their proximity to a grid connection with sufficient capacity to accommodate the power generated. As such, solar farms cannot be located anywhere and must be within proximity of the grid connection. Despite scarcity of capacity, we've secured a connection to Anfield substation to the north of the site. A key reason for choosing this location was the extensive woodlands which bound large parts of the site, providing excellent screening that negates nearly all long and medium distance views of the proposed development, which is unique for a project of this scale. There are likely to be some localised views of the development, which we identified early in the design process and have sought to provide mitigation in the form of new tree and hedgerow planting. The Council's landscape officer confirmed that the mitigation strategy is acceptable in terms of impacts from local receptors by stating the extent of landscape mitigation proposed would, without doubt, screen and filter the development from local sensitive receptors in the longer term following the establishment of vegetation. The land within the application site is currently used for pasture and is defined as poorer quality agricultural land, grade 3B and 4. The design and layout of the solar farm will enable sheep to continue grazing on the land and therefore not impact upon food security. Indeed, DEFRA have identified climate change as the biggest threat to food security. We've engaged with the local community at all stages through the process, starting with an in-person consultation event in April 2022. The initial design proposals were amended due to feedback from residents, and these changes were communicated in July 2022. Following the submission of the application, we made further revisions, removing a significant number of panels from the southeasternmost field. At this time, we wrote to all households in Burnhope to notify them of the proposed changes. As a responsible developer, Lightsource BP want to ensure that the development has a positive legacy for the residents of Burnhope and future generations. As such, we partnered with the County Durham Community Foundation to set up a community fund which will be available to locally based organisations. We will be investing £450,000 into the fund, which has an investment structure that will ensure access to funds in perpetuity, and we hope it will ensure that important organisations can continue to operate in these difficult economic times. The fund will also be available to individuals to assist with the current cost of living crisis. In addition to the community fund, we're offering to set up a fund for Burnhope Parish Council for £50,000, which they can use to bring forward initiatives to improve facilities in the village. The development will also contribute over £6 million in business rates over the lifetime of the development. Before I summarise, I'd just like to come back on a couple of issues that were raised by some of the previous speakers. I think it was implied that some of the land has an ecological designation associated with it. That's not the case, it's not within the local nature reserve. In respect to the Community Benefit Fund, as I've just mentioned, this has been set up in such a manner that it will be available in perpetuity, as opposed to just for the lifetime of the solar farm. So I think this is where it differs from some of the other offers that are being put forward by other developers. Regarding the scale of the development, whilst the application red line boundary is 92 hectares, the solar panels are actually only on 32 hectares of land, so effectively just over a third. And the built-up area of Burnhope, I believe, is about 43 hectares in area. And then finally, just regarding the public rights of way, all footpaths that run through the site will remain open. We aren't closing any of those footpaths, we aren't removing any of those footpaths. We will be diverting one of the routes, but all will be open and all will ensure access to the countryside for local residents. Just in summary, we've worked with the planning officer, consultees and local stakeholders to ensure that a development is brought forward that is fully compliant with all national and local planning policy. This has been reflected by the fact that no objections have been raised by technical consultees and the officer recommendation for approval. We hope that members acknowledge the significant benefits this proposal will bring and vote to support the application. Thank you. I'll just now hand over to Richard, who's one of the landowners.
Good morning. short and sweet. My name's Richard Eggleston. I've farmed the land on the edge, some of the land of this site, on the edge of Edge Lane for the last 30 years since its reinstatement from open cast coal mining. The land's grade 3B and 4, which in my particular circumstances makes it only capable of short-term, low-density grazing for cattle, which involves a late turnout and removal at very early and late summer. Many unacceptable welfare issues have been created when sheep were kept on this ground, not being directly connected to a farm holding and being on the urban fringe has led to untold amounts of stock worrying and boundary fence damage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. And now we have Mark and Jane Gray. You've got 5 minutes between you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, I am Jane Gray. Mark and I are some of the other landowners. Unfortunately, in 10 years, we've recorded 125 examples of sheep worrying, motorbike damage, fences cut, gates left open, stiles smashed. We've had 25 lambs killed and 9 ewes put down as a result of dog worrying on this land. The solar scheme offers us all a win-win-win. Renewable energy goes into our local grid. Security fencing brings the tremendous benefit of allowing us to graze ewes and lambs on these fields in safety for the first time, separated from dogs. Increasing food production and biodiversity on this land, because we will be able to stock at higher levels than we currently can, and we will be able to have ewes and lambs there again. Wide grassy footpaths will be maintained by us as they are now and enhanced. Walkers will no longer have to worry about their dogs causing harm to our livestock. Ground nesting birds such as curlews will be able to rear their chicks in peace and fledge them without being worried by dogs. There have been no curlew chicks reared on our land since we've had it in the last 10 years. 30 local jobs will be secured nearby at Broomhouse Farm thanks to the solar farm income, which will be invested in people and in infrastructure, allowing this sustainable farming business to survive. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Okay then, thank you everybody for all comments, much appreciated. We now move back to Chris. Chris, do you have any further comments to make after these representations?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Just a couple of points to pick up on. In terms of the consultations, we did send out letters to 788 neighbouring properties. We advertised the application in the local press, and I put site notices across the sites at key points on the public rights-of-way network so people would be able to see it if they were using it. In terms of the designations, there is an area of high landscape value, but it's outside of the site to the west. It's also outside of the Lanchester Neighbourhood Plan and outside of the Lanchester Conservation Area. All of these designations, they exist, but they have their own internal buffers. So the fact that it's not within them means we've identified them in the report, but identified to be no harm to them as well. That's all I want to come back to, but I just wanted to refer to Neil about the Community Benefit Fund as well, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just a sort of warning about the community fund. So I know we've heard in detail about what that consists of and the aspirations, particularly from Councillor Oliver, and we've heard from the applicant's agent. So I think the issue is it isn't something that we feel as officers is necessary to make the development acceptable. And because of that, because it's not CIL-regs compliant, our advice is that no weight should be afforded to that. So it's essentially something that sits outside of the planning system. Now that's, I think, adequately summarised in the officer's report at paragraphs 186 and 187. So I'll just go back over what the officer said at paragraph 187 in particular. Essentially what he's saying there is that there isn't a particular impact from this development that could be mitigated by a community fund. So normally when we're looking at financial payments for benefits, you'd have to have some impact that they would mitigate, and here we don't feel that there is. So essentially what we're saying is no weight should be afforded to that particular matter in the assessment of this application.
Thank you, Neil, for that. Right, and yeah, we'll now open it up to the committee to debate the application. Carl, can I just come in to Patricia first, because she asked, she's waited patiently to come over. Thank you, Patricia, over to you.
So a desk-based assessment is using information that already exists about the site that you can look in the historical environmental record, which will give you an indication of what you might find on the site. So in this case, the site was mostly open-casted in the 80s and 90s. So from that, they knew there was going to be unlikely to be any remains there. There is an area of the site that wasn't subject to open casting, and that's had an on-site investigation of geophysical assessment. That's also demonstrated there's unlikely to be remains there. That's what the desk base means, if that helps.
Carl, over to you, Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of questions, and I don't know if the planning officer can help us out with this a little bit. We've heard from various speakers that there's been amendments and changes to the scheme, sort of as the applications develop and progress. So I wonder if the planning officer could just outline exactly how the scheme differs now from what happened when what the original proposal was and at what stage, because obviously there's a number of objections in, and I wondered whether some of them changes might be down to some of the feedback they've received. And the second point is, am I understanding you right that there's no legal requirement for the developer to make any monies available to the community? I think that's what you said, but I just want to clarify that for my own peace of mind. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Marshall. So when the application was submitted, the solar panels were in this area of the site here in the southeast, and we had the objections from the RSPB, CPRE and Durham Wildlife Trust, as well as our own ecologists raising issues about bird mitigation. And paired with the objections from the residents in Burnhope, the applicant suggested drawing back the solar panels from this area to move them away from properties, but also create an area for wildlife mitigation in there. So that's the change from it being submitted. Now, in terms of the community fund, they've offered this money, and it has become an awareness within planning. On previous schemes, we've been completely separate from it, so we know it's there, but it's just not something we should be taking into consideration and determination. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think the planning office has addressed this, but yes, just for clarification, in answer to Councillor Marshall's question, there is no legal requirement for the developer to make those funds available to the community. There isn't an impact which we feel it's appropriate to mitigate with financial payments.
Yeah, just before I come over to you, Simon, just for the applicant, in relation to the community fund, you know, if the application, you know, if it did go through, how would that fund be managed? And also, a question that comes to me is regarding, yeah, if it's not a legal requirement, it's not a 106, is regarding the commitment that will be there for the length of the 40 years. Can we get some assurances over the fund?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So we're working with the Community Durham Community Foundation. They're quite a well-established, organisation who do this on, I think, some of the schemes, they're not on some of the wind farms in the area. So we would do, it would basically be an endowment payment up front, and the foundation will then invest that fund. So that's what ensures it's available in perpetuity. And then we will continue to make payments over the period of the solar farm, which then goes into the fund. Any local residents or organisations would then apply to the Community Foundation. They will manage that fund, and they will decide whether to approve any grants and issue grants to those organisations or members of the public.
Thank you. Councillor Simon Wilson.
So yeah, I guess just following on from that a little bit before I come on to my other question, if this was approved, it would, as much as it's not needed legally, it would be a legal requirement that's there. It would be required to be paid out because it's in the planning, it's within the planning, yes?
No. We're not proposing to secure that. Right. So that would essentially be a voluntary arrangement for the developer. I mean, clearly the developer's made a public commitment to that, but we as a planning authority couldn't secure that legally.
Right. So just on top of that, in terms, I've heard a few, I think possibly something that's really quite interesting around this is the quality of the farmland that's there. I know Burnhope really well. I played cricket up there for God knows how many years before my ankle packed in. So knowing the area, knowing that was the previous, like the open cast has been said, what sort of quality of land is that actually left? Because there's some people been saying it's fine for arable, but we had at the start, you said grazing. Is that just all it is essentially now, is grazing land? And as a result, is for what would be required, you'd need quite a lot of work to get the yields out of it. Because if that's the case, I think that then creates a very different attitude, because different approach on what could be the balancing act on that. Can I get that answer, and I'll come back with a couple of comments if that's all.
Yes, I think it's only grade 3 and 4 land on there, or 3B and 4 land. As far as I'm aware, it's pretty much grass and grazing on there. There was a mention of some arable. I guess that is in the eastern corner, but the landowners there might be able to confirm that with me. But from the aerial photographs I've seen since the open cast, it's just been grass.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just because, I mean, in terms of looking at the sort of visual amenity, obviously we have to consider it. The screening you've mentioned, how long would that take for some of the screening to sort of take place? How much of it is in place at the minute with regards to it, as to exact, because obviously...
So the proposed tree planting that is going to go in on this boundary here and elsewhere on the site, for it to fully establish and get to the height to match what is there. And if we go forward, you know, this is the plantation there. You're looking at 10 to 15 years for it to come close to that. And looking, so this is also Edge Lane, and that is the tree plant that we just saw in the previous slide there. So it would be planted further along here, and should the development be approved, then the panels would be in this field, and they would be exposed for that early time in the first 5 years, but then the planting would start picking up, and then beyond that, they would start to be fully obscured. But there is an intermediary time, obviously.
I'll tell you what, I'll come back with my comments later after other people have asked questions, if that's all right, Chair.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Simon. Any other questions? Councillor Bill Moist.
Thank you, Chair. Please excuse my ignorance, but there was a comment at the start of the meeting saying that there was a possible second application, which will make the very close proximity to this the biggest solar farm in the country. Was that correct?
We don't have another application yet. There is a public consultation from the applicant for another, I don't have it fully on here, for another site in this area. Until it's an application, we can't take that into consideration. But should this one be approved, then that one would have come up against cumulative impact. I don't know the figures in terms of that being the largest in the country. There are some very large sites elsewhere. The applicant might be able to give you more information on that. They've got some big sites themselves.
Yeah, there's also lots more sun in other parts of the country as well. But, you know, I just think it needed to be confirmed that it could be massive. Going to the community benefits, there's always a weighing up of benefits and costs. I mean, we're only talking about £12,500 per annum, which isn't a lot. I don't know if there's any possibility of the applicant to offer anything else. Just something to consider. When we refused Het and Merton, we asked as a committee if it was possible to draw up a list of preferred sites within County Durham so that we wouldn't be faced with these problems. Food preservation and green energy. I just want to ask possibly Stephen if there's been any progress on that, because I haven't heard anything back that we could. I understand it's private enterprise and they can put an application in wherever, but it might help the developers and ourselves if we could identify suitable sites that may not have the same ecological impact. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, thank you. Yes, in relation to where the council stands policy-wise on solar farms, officers in our spatial policy team are looking to go to consultation shortly on a SPD, supplementary planning document, specifically on solar and other forms of renewable energy. And I understand that's one of the areas which we will be looking at as part of that piece of work. However, in terms of where we're at today, the consultation has not even started on that SPD. So any thoughts and any policy direction which subsequently comes from that, you know, it's far too early in the statutory planning process to give it any weight today, Chair.
Cathy and then Patricia. Cathy, Councillor. Or Patricia, yes, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I have read the report. I have real issues with this on many of, there are many planning policies that I think this could be turned down on. Policy 26, public rights of way. Now we are, as councillors, we're fighting all the time to keep public rights of way. We have an issue in this country with health and well-being and obesity, and we are quite happy to just take these rights of way. Every time we have one of these applications come, it's the same thing that comes up. The other thing, I think, is water management. I don't see how over 40 years you can guarantee that this will not affect the water table around that area. Policy 10, I don't think that anything can mitigate for people who live near there permanent landscape impact. I just don't think that whatever it is, they have taken away for 40 years an amenity for those residents that is very important for their well-being and people that visit. We are looking to make County Durham a place for visitors to come and spend their leisure time and look at our beautiful countryside. But we're quite happy to put these solar farms, swathes of them, all over the country. And I just don't think that's fair. And the residents, particularly in this one, are going to suffer very badly. Protection of protected species, policy 41. I mean, to be quite frank with you, birds are very important. The nesting birds are very important. It's all very well to say you're going to plant more trees, more hedges. They take years to regenerate, years and years. People there will never get the benefit of that. The amount of money that's going to be generated for the renewable energy, in my view, is not enough. It doesn't outweigh the damage that it's doing to the environment and to the residents that live there. And this is, paragraph 8 says it's a mineral safeguarding area. Can somebody explain exactly what that means?
It's a mineral safeguarding area for coal. It's a long-standing identified area. Obviously, most of that coal is gone now through open casting.
Yes, exactly. Right. Okay. So, you know, there are just too many policies here that I think this can be turned down on, and quite safely turned down on. And, oh, another point I wanted to bring up, paragraph 177, the temporary removal of significant land. Now, I'm sorry, 40 years is not temporary. 10 years might be temporary, but 40 years isn't temporary. The people of that area have lost that for generations. And I think that the councillors ought to think seriously before they decide to pass this application. If they do pass it, I recommend it be turned down.
Thank you for that, Patricia. Councillor Cathy Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. Just one quick question for me, just for clarification, please. So you said there was 788 letters of consultation sent out. So am I right in assuming that more than half of in objections? Thank you.
Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks again to the officers and the team for putting together a really comprehensive report. It's been really interesting listening to all sides, and although I'll be judging this application and the views that I have been informed by this, I do note that there has been a number of applications for solar farms across County Durham, and every time we appear to have the same members talking that they're not in denial about climate change and the pro-green energy, but coming up with the same arguments. I think with this particular development, and I've listened carefully to the objections from the residents, and I feel that regardless of where one of these schemes was put, there would always be objections from residents. And the problem with solar farms, as we've heard, is that you can't pop them on brownfield sites in village centres or in city centres. They've got to be located in areas where they've got good access to daylight and good grid connectivity, or they're just simply not viable. Now, I think the way the world is at the minute, we've got huge, huge issues in our country in particular where we're being left isolated with not just the supply but the security of energy longer term. And the solution to that's obvious, and it's staring us all in the face. If we can produce more energy to power our homes through green methods, and we can do that locally, then that puts us in a much more secure position going forward. I think with this particular scheme, the fact that we're looking at nearly 14,000 homes being able to be powered by green, renewable energy using natural resources, the fact that it's the equivalent of taking 8,000 family cars off the road, I think that goes some way to Durham starting to show that we want to do our bit to support the environment and actually deal with some of the life-changing things that are going on around us. I think some of the things that we've heard around the fact that there is not a single footpath to be closed here, that the site can still be used for grazing, albeit the quality of the land isn't great for that, but it can still help to diversify farming, and the fields can still be used to that, as alongside producing green electricity. I think is quite an attractive proposition compared to some of the previous schemes we've had before this committee. And it's not a popularity contest being a member. I think we've got to make decisions based on the planning policy, and I'm sort of I'm given some sort of reassurance really that the officers have looked at this and have sort of considered it against the existing policy, and I'm pleased that Stephen's mentioned that the council is looking at a supplementary planning document. It's something that I've been asking for some time in this committee to give everybody some security. But in the absence of one of those at the minute, we've got to consider this against the existing planning policy, and we've got to look to protect the council from the risk of appeal against this in the future. And I think on all of, when you weigh all of those things up, I think any future application, because Bill's right, you know, if there was suddenly another application came forward from another developer adjacent to it, the cumulative impact of this would give me huge concern. But looking at this application on its merits in its own right, Chair, I would like to formally propose that we accept the officer's recommendations and start to do our bit to deal with the issues that the country faces, do our bit in County Durham. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Carl, for that. Simon, I think you were next. So Simon Wilson.
Cheers, Chair. Yeah, so maybe just come back to some of the comments. I mean, in terms of looking at it, it's interesting that following Councillor from Councillor Joplin's question about the mineral, that actually this could potentially be green energy being built on top of coal, what we used to use, that we'll be turning from the old fossil fuels towards a green agenda with this. I think we have to look at it, as Councillor Marshall said, these things do have to be on big scale, otherwise they just don't work. So they're always going to be an issue. I think in terms of it, because they are very rare, they will stand out initially. I know obviously in terms of walking, people will still be able to walk past, be able to see it. The roads around there are pretty quick moving. It makes us think to the one that's actually just off the A19 as you pull off to Billingham Seal Sands, that you buy and you pass it before you know it, that's a 60 road as well, and that is a decent size. I think the other thing as well, when we talk about visual amenity, there's something quite prescient about the Burnhope area as well, which, to come back to visual amenity, which I wonder, when this was sited, God knows when it was, and it's the mast, the television mast that was put at the end of Burnhope and chosen because of the site, because of where it was. Now, I imagine that visually wasn't the best at the time. However, it was something that was needed at the time for to progress forward, for people to have access. And this is the same. In order to move forward with this, I do realise there are some potential breaches of plan and policy, but as I said and the reason I asked the questions earlier, it's for the Balancing Act. And the Balancing Act is whether this causes more harm or not. And I don't think it does. I think it does more good than harm. So I'm happy to second Councillor Marshall's proposal.
Thank you for that, Councillor Simon Wilson. Next we have down is Cathy, and then Maura, then Patricia. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like it on record that I am pro-renewable energy. However, I do believe that using arable land and quite devastatingly destroying our landscape and does not the good doesn't outweigh the bad. I would just like that on record. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cathy. Councillor Maura McKeown, after you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite split on this because I see where residents are coming from about the landscape impact, and that is a material planning consideration to take into account. I haven't actually fully made my mind up yet, but I just wanted to come back on the lip service that some members of this committee frequently pay to the climate emergency. I understand what Councillor Joplin's saying about the amount of time that the solar farm would be there, but quite frankly, that is my life. But I'm going to be the person who sits and watches the world burn, and quite frankly, that's what my generation's going to have to do. And it's not necessarily what the generations of other members on this committee are going to have to do. We take each of these planning applications one by one, and I think that some of the ones that have come before this committee have had more merit than others. Some have clearly gone against our local plan and some haven't. But quite frankly, this blanket approach that some members of this committee do have, to just throw out any solar panel, any solar farm application, it's not sustainable in any sense of the word, because quite frankly, County Durham's going to have to do its bit for the climate emergency. And the only place that we can put these kind of developments is on land in the countryside. It's not arable land, it's currently grazing land, and as we've heard, that land is very difficult for the farmers to use for that purpose. Although I do, as I say to residents, completely take your point about landscape value into consideration making this decision. Personally, I think it's a very big project, and I think that a smaller project, a less intrusive project, would automatically get my support, because it doesn't have the level of landscape intrusion that this has. But at the same time, it comes back to the need for a strategy. I remember in the last council term, when I was on planning committees, I very rarely saw anything like this come before me. But since 2021, actually, there's been a massive uptick in, I think this developer in particular, wanting to develop on this land. And I take into consideration what's been said about us having a broader plan, but we need a more fundamental strategy that includes public consultation right at the very beginning, because fundamentally, my grandmother, I don't know if people from Burnout P knew Kitty Callan, but my grandmother worked with Lily Ross on the Burnout Miners Support Group during the miners' strike. My grandfather mined at Mainsforth and at Vane Tempest, and that was an incredibly difficult job. Lots of people got COPD and pneumoconiosis from creating energy here, and there was a huge amount of scarring to the landscape that came from communities like Burnhope being forged through the Industrial Revolution. But that's not what we're talking about here. We have actually the chance to be a player in energy again, which we haven't been able to do since the 70s and 80s, without the health impacts and actually the environmental impacts that we had before. And although I take the landscape issue into consideration here, I do want to voice my concerns about the way that this committee handles renewable energy applications. It's not just that it's an application by application issue, or even the climate emergency. It just sends the wrong message about County Durham. Thank you.
Thank you, Maura. Patricia, and then Elaine we have.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I'd like to take issue with Councillor Marshall. Whether I vote against solar farms or not doesn't mean I don't care about the environment, because I do. And the reason I don't vote for the ones that come forward is because they always put them on land that is inappropriate. There are better areas away from the built conurbations to put these things. And I do think we've got to care about our residents. Of course I care about the environment. You know, I do all I can as a housewife, and like we all do, to try and look after the planet. You know, you make sure you've got areas in your garden that wildlife can come. What is the point of that? If we're filling the country with swathes of solar panels and these farms, if they put them where they weren't in view, or they weren't taking away local amenity, there's a difference. It's not that I don't agree with these sort of things being done. It's the fact that everyone we seem to get is always in an area that affects local residents and is really contentious. And the size of this is very contentious. And the fact that it's already being spoken about, having another one literally a road away if you measured the size, it's just unacceptable. And these companies that are putting these things out have got to look for better places to put them. And I know that farmers are keen to do this, because we all know the reasons why. They get quite a lot of money for doing it. And you know, I don't know whether I'd do it if I was a farmer, but the point is we're here to look at this application, and there are reasons to turn it down. That site doesn't produce a whole load of benefit, but it does take an awful lot away from the residents. And on the planning policies I've already pointed out, I think we could refuse this. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Elaine, off to you.
Hi, I would just like to say this is a huge development. It has significant impact on all the residents around. But building on land like this is so easy for a developer to come along, because we have so much of it. You know, they need to be looking at other places than our green land. And we did this with building. We covered brown sites first. They need to be looking at roofs of buildings, sides of buildings. They need to be looking at other places before they start to cover. Just this is a very large development, and I'm all for this type of thing. I'm much sooner this than nuclear power or whatever, but they need to be looking at other places first.
Thank you, Elaine. Just before I bring you in, Kevin, can I have a little sort of have a say on it? I did the site visit yesterday and walked, I think, sort of, you know, was able to see the the site, and I have to say it was absolutely ginormous. It was enormous, the footprint of where the solar farm's going to go. It's one of the hardest ones what's come into this committee, I have to say, because of the situation with the global situation with energy. It's such a difficult one, and sort of it's getting that right location. Not sure if it's Carl who said that. It's like it's always going to be sort of have its supporters and objectives. That's always going to happen. But yesterday, like sort of visiting that site, I have to say somebody on some speech said it was a beautiful area, and I just second that. It's absolutely amazing. You know, people who live there, you'd be very fortunate to live in that area. It's absolutely, it is wonderful and beautiful to look at. And I always say in all the committees I sit on, the local representation and the local members, I always listen to that, and I've got a strong ear to listen to what the locals say, and that strong, the amount of people in the chamber today, and like putting that across is coming through. And I have to say, like, I'm really sort of torn between which way to go on this, because it's such a hard one. But yeah, it's one of the things that has stuck out there is in the papers was the Durham Wildlife objection, and I don't think not many of us have touched on that. It's regarding the mitigation. There hasn't really been any. And I think sort of the coverage of the land, what's going to be taken up if the application was approved, that would probably could be a better proposal for the wildlife mitigation on such a size, such a vast area. Yeah, that's my just 2 penneth, and as I say, I'm really torn between this. But next on the list, I think we have Councillor Kevin Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. I'd really like to reiterate everything that you've just raised there. It is a balance. It is getting that balance right. We've got the very strongly held views of the local community and the local members who've expressed their concerns. We have the significant concerns about the impact of the development on the landscape and the visual amenity. But you've also got to balance on the other side as well. Say it's being raised that this proposal will be one of the largest solar developments in the country, and it's not what the county needs. I'm of the opinion that's exactly what this county needs. It's just getting that balance of, is it in the right place, and does the benefits outweigh the harm? And I've listened, interestingly, suggesting that there's a viable alternative, siting panels on domestic and commercial properties, and listen to a comment made by one of the objectors with interest. Also raised the issue about significant concerns of fire risk with solar panels, which will lead, if entirely accurate, to the obvious conclusion that it's got to be an isolated setting where we concentrate these solar panels. And there's a reason why these sites are always on the edge of settlements. They've got to actually plug into the grid system. That's actually, by the very way they operate, they've got to be located in these areas where they're going to get the best outcome. And I'm of the mind, considering the benefits against the harm, that I've got to say that I've got to fall on the side that supporting the officer's recommendation.
Thank you for that, Kevin. And I think the last and final, I'm not sure if there's anybody else, is Maura. Oh, sorry, I'll come back to you, Sam. Sorry, I missed you there.
Thank you, Chair. Like I said, I am still working through my own voting on this. But I just wanted to make a point about wildlife. We're living through an extinction period right now, the Anthropocene period. And in part that's because of the rise in global temperatures caused by our reliance on fossil fuels. Actually, in large part, that's why. And so we can talk a lot about biodiversity and protecting species, when actually the biggest threat to species is the change in temperature across the world. And I just wanted to get that straight for members, that when we're talking about renewable energy, when we're talking about the environment, we have a greater understanding of how the broader climate change worries are impacting local biodiversity. Thank you.
Maura and Sam, Councillor Sam Serr.
Thanks, Chair. I just want a wee bit clarification on paragraph 164, the public rights of way officer. Do we have a public rights of way officer here? We haven't. Could I ask why?
Are you able to fill us in on that one?
It's just regarding paragraph 164. Obviously, the public rights of way officer is not objecting to the proposal, but I've raised concerns regarding the vehicle maintenance access on Bridle 22 and 23. I was just wanting some more information on what are those concerns.
It's just their concern about the conflict of users on those routes. But in terms of the maintenance access, as we've identified elsewhere, it's very limited. It's less than one van a week, which is not dissimilar from or a lot less than the traffic to the farm that already uses that route. So we didn't think that was a significant level of harm, and as the Public Rights of Way officer hasn't objected, they aren't here today.
But they have raised concerns over it. Yeah. So
Yeah, their concerns are primarily the deterioration in the amenity of the existing routes on there, as we've put in their comments.
Councillor Moist.
Thanks, Chair. We seem to have slipped into the actual debate side now. There's been a suggestion by, a recommendation by Councillor Marshall that we go to the vote on this. I would just like to explore the options of a second option, which would be a deferment. The reason for that, I would hate, if this application is approved, for this to be used as a precedent for the second one. That is my big fear, because that would be absolutely enormous. And I take all of the, I know we have to deal with this in isolation, but I would hate to be responsible for inflicting something twice the size on the local residents. Just on the responses of the local residents, and Councillor Marshall again has referred to that, and yourself, we have to listen to the local members and the residents. The objections from the number of letters sent out has been tremendous. Not very often do we get that percentage of objections, 466, I think, out of 788. And we have to listen to the local people. I live in Chesley Street. I won't be impacted by this. I am being impacted, as my colleague suggests, with global warming. I understand that. But really, I would like a couple of things. Is it possible to consider a deferment until the next one? And also, I'm not satisfied that the proposal for £500,000 for the community is enough for the harm. It's £12,500 per annum to be administered by the County Durham Community Fund. I think it needs to be more. If the community are going to be adversely affected, they need to be the beneficiaries, and I think it needs a more local representation. But again, it's good, bad. I'm like everybody else. I perhaps should get more information, which is why I'm just suggesting a deferment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you on that, Bill. Yeah, I'm gonna ask Neil to come in on that, and then we're gonna come back to Chris. Then, other than that, unless anybody's got any burning issues, I think we fully debated it. Very good, and then we maybe move into a vote.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just on the issue of this proposed second application, I need to caution members against affording weight to that at this stage. Clearly we don't know whether that application's even going to come in. If it did, it would have to be assessed on its own merits at that time. It's not something that has a direct bearing on the merits of this application that's before you. So for those reasons, also, I'm not sure what the benefit of a deferment would be that's been suggested. I think the only other thing I would say is in terms of the community fund, I'll go back to the advice I've already given, which is essentially that is a voluntary offer by the developer.
Thank you, Neil. And Chris, I'm not sure if you had something to bring in relation to the wildlife.
I think just having a quick consideration of where these sites are located as well first. So there's been suggestion that they look elsewhere to put these sites. Now, the characteristics that the applicants are looking for, from what we've seen from this application and previous ones, is sites that have no designations on them and that are close to a grid connection. So this site, although there's some designations around it, the actual land doesn't have any designations, low-grade farmland and a grid connection. So it's a fairly good site, really, and that's what we've picked up in the assessment. Now, looking at alternatives, it's been suggested brownfield land and land away from people. Brownfield land's often allocated for other developments, such as industry or housing, and to put solar on it would be a conflict with policy in itself. I mean, if we're looking for sites that are further afield, that's away from people, that's away from grid connections, and again, they wouldn't work. So that's why we've ended up with a site here and why we are recommending approval for this one. Now, in terms of ecology, as I mentioned in my presentation, we did get objections from Durham Wildlife Trust, RSPB, and CPRE. And then, as part of the development of the application, we did end up with the mitigation area in the southeast. And in discussions with our own council's ecologist, came to the conclusion that that was an acceptable mitigation level, went out to reconsultation, and whilst those bodies didn't reply to the consultation, they didn't cite any further objections to it. Our own ecologist has found the development to be acceptable. So that's where we are with ecology. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Neil, can I just bring you in just to explain the situation we're in now? We've got a mover and a seconder, and then in relation to Patricia.
Thank you, Chair. So, as I understand it, there's a motion to approve the application in accordance with the officer recommendation. That was put forward by Councillor Marshall, and I think it was seconded by Councillor Wilson. We need to go to the vote on that. Should that motion be lost, then we'll obviously have to come back to members for an alternative motion, and I'd probably be looking at Councillor Jopling to lead on that. So I'll hand back over to the Chair.
Thank you, Neil. So the proposal is Carl's put forward and seconded by Simon. Is proposed to accept the officer's recommendation. All those in favour? No. Okay, and all of those against? And that motion is carried. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, everybody, for attending today's meeting. Anybody want to stay, please feel free to stay. Anybody wishing to leave, then feel free to leave. Thank you. Okay, everybody, we'll move on to the second item. Second item on the agenda is... If you want to have a 2-minute break, we want a drink, that's absolutely fine.
Chair? Chair? Hello? No, I just wanted to note, since we've got a moment of quietness, I was a little bit concerned by, should we say, the exiting of members of the public from the meeting in terms of some of the comments they made. I just want to note my concern, and I just think we need to have a think about stamping down on this a little bit, because it's, you know, it is unsettling. You know, I'm not going to use the threat word, but it might be constituted as a, and I think it's just something we need to be mindful of. And yeah, no, I'm not saying anything against you, Alan. By the way, I'm just noting it.
No, Craig, and it's fully understandable. You know, you kind of police it from up here, I guess. But you know, maybe when we have such applications which are so sensitive, maybe it's a time to maybe have staff at the back to to police, maybe a warden or something, when things do get a little bit. It does happen time to time, and it's the nature when you get such sensitive, people's emotions sort of come out. And point noted, Craig. Thank you. Did Maura leave? No. Okay, everybody, if you kindly take your seats and we'll recommence the meeting. The second item on the agenda is Belmont Church of England Junior School, Buckinghamshire Road, Belmont, Durham. And Officer Claire Teasdale is going to do the presentation. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. I'd just like to start with an update to the report, please. And I'd just like to say, in reference to paragraphs 109 and 127 of the report, there's a reference to the car park, the proposed new car park off the links, being behind number 10, 12, 14 and 16. It should read 2A, 2, 4, 6 and 8, but only the assessment remains the same and is correct. In terms of the site, the 8.2 hectare site is an established school located in the Belmont area of Durham City. It's surrounded by residential properties on all sides, with Broomside Road don't think this is... Oh. It's not. Sorry, my pointer. Oh. Right, sorry about that technical detail. But we have Broomside Lane to the north, Buckinghamshire Road, which goes around here to the west and the south, and then the links up here, and the Cleverley Shops area in this particular here. The existing access to the school is off Buckinghamshire Road. This is the aerial of the photograph, and it shows the current layout of the schools and the playing fields, with the juniors at this area, with the infants, at this building here, the juniors here, and then the secondary school here, with the the sports block here and the drama block just here. And obviously you can see the playing fields in this area here. I have some photographs of the site. This shows the existing vehicular access off Buckinghamshire Road. These are photographs showing the existing school buildings, which date from the 1960s and 1970s, showing the nursery school, the primary and the secondary schools on there. The new buildings would be constructed on the existing playing fields, and this is the location of the proposed primary school with Cleverley Park Medical Centre and properties in of the links on the background. This is a view from the pedestrian access from the links looking towards the application site, towards the location of the proposed car park, sports block and secondary school. And this is another shot looking at the proposed secondary school and sports block. This is a photograph showing the proposed site access, which would just be off the links, that would just be around this column here. And these steps would be stopped up, and there'd be another pedestrian access just to the north around this area. This photograph I wanted to show you is taken at the edge of the proposed artificial grass pitch to show the relationship between the pitch and the residential areas on Buckinghamshire Road. The distance from the edge of the pitch to the mature vegetation in the distance, which you can see along here, is 23 metres, and then there are private gardens beyond the mature vegetation that you can see. Details of the proposal are set out in paragraphs 11 to 30 of your report. This is the proposed site layout, and you can see here that this is the proposed artificial grass pitch. This is the proposed primary school, the proposed secondary school here, and then we have the proposed sports block here. This is the proposed car park just off the links and the proposed new access. Again, you can see there would be, the sports provision would be provided at the completion of the development. This is a visualisation of the proposal, and again, this is showing you from the links area, showing the new car park, the new primary school, the sports block and the secondary school. In terms of consultations and representations, these are set out in paragraphs 62 to 91 of your report. There's been no objections from statutory and internal consultees, subject to conditions where appropriate. Representations to the application as originally submitted that included the demolition of these buildings. As the report tells you, originally the application was for the construction and the demolition of all of the buildings. However, the application was subsequently amended, and so now only provides for the construction of the new buildings and the demolition of the drama block. The demolition of the other school buildings are subject to a separate planning application. So in reference to the original application, we received 10 objections from local residents. The issues that they raised were being traffic and road safety issues associated with the current school, the layout and the design of the proposed school, landscaping, residential amenity, and the impact of the artificial grass pitches, and also construction and other matters. When we consulted on the amended application, we received 2 objections from local residents who subsequently submitted additional information. These were residents that objected originally as well. In addition, we had 2 objections from the two objectees from the original consultation have written expressing concerns. Mr Wilmot, a resident of Buckinghamshire Road, will address the committee today regarding his objections to the proposal, so you can hear directly from him. We also received a representation from Cleveley Park Medical Centre, and they had raised issues in relation to drainage, privacy, trees and noise during the building works. And these issues, responses have been sent to the medical practice, and we haven't heard anything more from them in response to that. In summary, the proposed development would provide a modern, efficient primary and secondary school within Belmont on a site currently used for educational purposes. Furthermore, it would provide a significant benefit to the community, be sustainable and well designed, and be in keeping and be complementary to its surroundings. Consideration has been given to the main planning issues associated with this development, including the principle of the development and the impact in terms of layout, access, traffic and residential amenity. The proposal has also been assessed against relevant development plan policies and material considerations, and subject to conditions where appropriate, the impacts are considered to be acceptable. The proposal has generated some public interest, with letters of objection having been received, and these concerns expressed have been taken into account and carefully balanced against the benefits of the scheme in terms of modern education provision. The proposed development is considered to broadly accord with the relevant development plan policies of the County Durham Plan and the relevant sections of the NPPF. I recommend that this application be approved subject to the conditions set out in the report, but with an amendment to Condition 5 to allow construction of the new access road off the links to be constructed to a standard suitable for construction traffic and then completed to full standard prior to first occupation of the buildings. In addition, I would also request that we add to Condition 15, which controls the hours of lighting for the artificial grass pitch, to also include lighting for the 3-court mugger pitch as well. Thank you.
Many thanks for that, Claire. Right, and now we move on to register speakers, and we have first one is the objector, Simon Wilmot. Simon, you have 5 minutes.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to speak. And just to clarify, I am, in principle, very happy with the school being built in general. It's a school building that is required in the area. My concern is that my house is one of the 8 or 9 that are most severely affected by the location and the proposed use of the artificial grass pitches. While I don't object to those pitches being constructed and used by the school, the current proposed hours of 9 or 10 o'clock at night, some 20 metres from my garden, and the lack of any acoustic barrier or fencing shown on the drawings are a concern. We live next to a school. When we moved here, we knew we lived next to a school, and we expect to put up with noise during school hours, but at present it goes well beyond that. My living room, dining room and young children's bedrooms all back onto the back of our house. In summer months, we won't be able to have a window open to allow the children to get to sleep. We won't be able to enjoy time in the garden because of not only the level of noise, but the type of noise that these activities bring. Foul and abusive language, a lot of shouting, whistling, ball strikes. My underlying concern is that it'll significantly impact not only my life, but life of other residents in the area, in that we won't be able to use our outdoor space. And according to the noise exposure hierarchy contained in Appendix A of the noise assessment report, the pitch in this location should be avoided. The impact assessment measures the average noise at point F, which is at the bottom of our garden, at present, at around 47 dB on average. I think it was 45. Sport England guidance suggests that that'll go up to 58 as an average from those pitches. It's a significant increase of 13 dB, which will sound over double as loud as what's there now. And obviously the louder elements, the shouting, the swearing, the whistles are way over that. That could be 100, 120 dB. Granted, there's some bushes, some trees between my property and the pitch, but they're going to do little to stop the level of noise that's there, especially getting up to the bedroom windows. If the pitch is to remain in its current location, potentially being used during more sociable hours, I'd also add that a bit of thought needs to be given to the acoustic treatments required. I've got further concerns with regards to there not being any acoustic barriers around the pitch, there not being a new fence shown to our boundary other than weld mesh, which is just open. Figure 2 in the noise assessment survey shows at least 4 dwellings, including mine, that are either within the grey shaded area or just outside by a matter of millimetres, which would suggest that the noise at these locations will either be above or very, very close to the allowable limits set out by Sport England. Again, this is the reason why I feel like there should be some acoustic barriers provided in these areas. Light pollution will also be an issue, but I don't think it'll be as intrusive as the noise, so I've not commented on that. In summary, it's a heavily populated area, and allowing these pitches to operate all year round, all weekend, until 9 or 10 o'clock at night, will significantly affect the quality of life of those living by, especially due to the noise levels and the language. I won't be able to enjoy my garden with my young children for fear of the shouting, the swearing, constantly from those pitches. During school hours, it would obviously be controlled. There'd be teachers there. It wouldn't be an issue. It's more outside of those school hours that is a concern. And because of that, I would request that it's either conditioned or declined until these matters are looked at. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Simon. For the supporters, we have Jen Patterson. Jen, are you the only speaker? Yeah. 2 years. So we do 2.5 minutes each. Is that okay?
Good morning. I'm Jen Patterson, Associate Director at DPP, and speaking on behalf of the applicants, Durham County Council, the Department for Education and Kier. The Council's education team has identified that replacement schools in Belmont are essential to ensure that local children continue to receive the highest possible standard of education within appropriate facilities. You will have seen from the presentation how dated the existing school buildings are and how much children need new fit-for-purpose facilities. The development will provide significantly enhanced education provision for the 2 schools, as well as facilities for community use. This is supported in national and local planning policy. The existing site is able to provide significantly enhanced education provision for the 2 schools, as well as facilities for community... The existing site is able to provide the facilities that meet Department for Education and Sport England requirements, and the layout has been designed to enable staff and pupils to remain in the existing buildings during construction, reducing disruption. Following construction of the new buildings, the schools will decant into their new accommodation. The demolition phase, which is subject to a separate planning application, will then commence, and finally the completion of the provision of the sports fields, landscaping and parking. The principal issues we've sought to address throughout design development and through consideration of the planning application have related to design and scale, highways, residential amenity and sustainability. Turning first to design and scale, the proposals are designed around the optimum spatial arrangement for the primary and secondary schools, whilst considering operational needs, access and amenity of surrounding residential properties. External materials have been chosen to complement materials used in the locality. The layout will create a campus around the shared entrance and car park, allowing the sports fields to spread around the school buildings and create a buffer between the residential properties to the north, west and south. The location of the 2 school buildings, sports hall, multi-use games areas and all-weather pitch creates a logical arrangement of external areas based on age ranges of pupils and function of space. Turning now to amenity, the secondary school building will be 3 stories and positioned 54 metres from the nearest residential property. This distance ensures that standards of daylight and sunlight and privacy of residential properties are unaffected. The primary school building has been designed over 2 stories with the first floor set back, creating a stepped building structure which minimises its mass. Retention of existing trees and vegetation along the site boundaries where possible ensures screening and a natural buffer between the properties and the site. The use of flood lighting on the all-weather pitch and multi-use games areas will be controlled with the lighting turned off by agreed times to minimise impacts to neighbouring properties from lighting disturbance. The nuisance action team have no objection in relation to noise. In terms of highways, A robust transport assessment and travel plan were prepared in consultation with the schools and with highways officers, and the highways team have confirmed the proposals are acceptable. The travel plan seeks to proactively promote active and sustainable travel to and from the site and minimise the traffic impact of the development on the immediate surrounding area. This includes communications with parents, carers, students, through letters, emails and newsletters regarding appropriate and considerate parking. The buildings have been designed to achieve net zero carbon in operation, enabling the council to lead the way in sustainability and presents opportunities to educate pupils about sustainability and climate change. The new school proposals will deliver significantly enhanced educational and community facilities and contribute to all three dimensions of sustainable development. We respectfully ask members of Planning Committee to approve the planning application. Now hand over to Paul.
So I've got about 30 seconds. I'm Paul Mars, and I'm the head teacher from Belmont Community School, and I'm just speaking on behalf of Kirsty as well from the primary. Just wanted 1 minute, really. I think after a really contentious issue that you've heard, this one's a no-brainer for you as councillors. This is a new school, but it's not just essential, it's long overdue. We've been delivering education to the children of County Durham in substandard buildings for a long time. Since I've been head teacher of 8 years at Belmont, we've needed a new school. It was the first priority I identified as an incoming head. We finally got that opportunity, and we are thrilled as our children and the local community in terms of the need for the school. This will give us world-class facilities to deliver a world-class education for our children. The community usage is a real benefit. We already have agreements with our community association to open up facilities on a night, but I do understand residents and our neighbours and their concerns over noise, and I'm happy as a head teacher to work with people around that, and I agree about the need for buffering, for planting and anything that can help our neighbours. We want to be good neighbours. We are a community school. We're not about making money. So we're happy to work with the neighbours around the time for turning off lights. Obviously, Mr Wilmot did comment that it will be monitored during the day for our children, and I wouldn't expect bad behaviour, but it's on the evenings, and again, we'll work with the community association to work with bookings around their behaviour to help minimise that if possible, and we'd like to do anything to help around that, because what we need is world-class facilities for our children.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much for that. Claire, would you like to come back in on any points?
I think I'd just like to highlight that, you know, we're appreciative of the comments that's been made by residents, and, you know, we've sought to address that within the report in detail. Environmental health officers are sort of technical experts in terms of noise, have considered, you know, the application, and again, their comments are included within the report to you. They're satisfied with the hours of use that has been proposed, and we would secure those by condition. The hours of use had been longer in the first instance, but they have been reduced in response to concerns raised by residents. So that is again reflected within the proposed planning conditions. There is a requirement for a community use agreement to be required through condition, and again that would be something that you know, we'd look at, and, you know, there would be provision within that for sort of, you know, player etiquette on the pitch. So I think, you know, we can sort of seek to do that. The image that I showed you earlier, that showed the distance from the edge of the artificial grass pitch where it would be to the residential boundary was 23 metres. Then you have that mature hedgerow, and then beyond that you have the gardens of the properties, which, you know, do vary in width. Length, some of which are up to 19 metres when we've measured it. So, as I say, appreciative of the concerns that's been raised, but we have sought to address these and minimise them as far as possible.
Thank you, Claire, for that. Now we'll open it up to the committee to debate the application. We'll start on the left. Let's go work along here. We have Sam.
Thanks, Chair. Just out of curiosity, on an evening, on a Friday evening, on a Saturday evening, it's till 2200 hours, opposed to the 2105. Is there a specific reason for that? Because obviously I've just listened to the resident there with his concerns regarding his family. What reason is it for that extra hour on the Friday evening and the Saturday evening?
I don't know is the honest answer. It's currently, the site is currently open, so once we close the school, the community association takes sort of possession of the site, if you like, and it's open from 5 till 10. They are the current hours of all our sports pitches and sports hall and our performing arts block and so on that are hired out for the community. So that's what it currently is before the new build. So I'm assuming that that's just has been proposed to continue, but then following the application they've looked to particularly I think it's the 3G football pitch, which the residents, which is a new facility which we're thrilled about, but they are looking to shut that down at 9 o'clock, which would be earlier than we currently close our football pitches. Obviously that's in the summer because our football pitches are not floodlit, they're grass pitches used by the community on a night and can be booked up until 10 o'clock at night when it goes dark. But obviously when it goes dark in the winter they close a lot earlier.
Thanks for that. It's always good to see investment in our schools, in our children and for future generations. Again, I've said it before in this committee, it's a no-brainer. If there are problems, I'm sure the school and the residents will work together. I've got that feeling and that they can work together and hope any issues will be resolved. So on that note, I would like to move recommendation for approval, Chair.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was very reassuring to hear the school say that they weren't going to work with the community, and I echo what Sam says. It's great that we're investing in these type of things. Just one quick one for me, just more clarification on it, as well as a question. If there's 152 parking bays, why is only 8 being designated for electric parking? I just think that we could probably do a little bit more there, but that's just an observation.
Thank you, Claire. Any comments there, Claire?
That was the proposal put to us, but I'll bring in Phil Harrison from Highways.
I believe at the moment it meets the percentage in our parking SPD, but we are revising the parking SPD in line with Durham's stance on renewable energy to increase the number in the future, but at the moment it is policy compliant.
Thank you.
Chair, if I could just come back in, but if we're talking about building it now, we know the policy's going to change, maybe we should be looking at putting some more in. Just my opinion.
The head teacher's nodding his head, so I'm going to assume like that's happening.
That's what we want. We want more. I know it's money involved, but
yeah.
The more electrical
Okay then. Maybe it's a discussion with Councillor Wilkes might help that. Patricia, were you next one to speak there?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, just to say that I think this is absolutely brilliant and well needed. I was pleased to see that the car parking has been taken seriously, so it's not going to cause an issue when the property's used later on in the day. And you know, I think we'd all like these lovely new schools in our area, so I'm absolutely delighted to recommend this for approval, Chair. Chair.
That is a formal seconder. Thank you, Patricia. And John, I'll bring you in.
Yeah. Excuse me. John Higgins, Wingate Ward. I was going to second it because I think it's really good. I think it's really good investment for our youngsters. This is what we need. Patricia's right. We would like to see it in all our towns or villages. But I have one concern and one question. Concern is the time what's proposed for the outside fields to be closed 10 o'clock at night. I would like to have seen that reduced a bit further down, because I can imagine what the noise would be for residents that's living adjacent to the outside fields. So I would like to see that brought down if we could. And also my question is, and it might seem a strange question, but for the outside fields, for the people who are using the outside fields, have we got toilet facilities for them to use? Thank you, Chair.
Not on that one, John. Does anybody else want to speak on that? Claire, just on the comments on the time frame, which Councillor John Higgins alluded to there, what were...
I think that was something that the head teacher referred to earlier to another question, whereby the hours, the proposed hours of usage, well, they have been reduced because it had been 10 o'clock every day, and they were brought down, but for 2 days a week they were sort of like left to that later, so that there was that ability. As I say, sort of currently in our application, we have got, you know, every other night apart from those two, 5 minutes past 9. Miss Patterson, I don't know if there's anything you want to add in terms of the reasoning behind these hours from the Federation.
Thanks, Claire. The hours are based on the current usage, community usage hours that the school has. Obviously, they were reduced to 9:05. The 5 minutes is to allow for the lights to be switched off and everyone to clear the pitch. I think on the nights that it is open until 10 o'clock, it may not go on that long. It's just to allow that flexibility. I think those are the most popular nights, but also the all-weather pitch is, there's funding from the FA, and they require a certain amount of usage to be able to facilitate providing this facility.
Thank you for that, and if there's no further comments, yeah, I'll
Hello?
just... Sorry,
Mr Chair, can I come back in?
Sorry, John.
Sorry, Mr Chairman, can I come back in? Can I have the answer regarding the toilet facilities, please? Is there any toilet facilities available for the people who are using the outside pitches?
There is, yeah, there's toilet and changing facilities.
Thank you.
Okay, good point as well, John, yeah. Yeah, and I'd just like to say absolutely brilliant application, and I hope it's one of many what's going to come through this chamber, and as Plan Manager Stephen Reid says, there's some national funding coming down, so hopefully we'll all get one of these. Anyway, we've got a mover, as in Councillor Sam Zaire moved it, and it was seconded by Councillor John Higgins. All those in favour? Just before we take that forward, just as regarding that was with the amended conditions which Claire alluded to. So on that, we'll just go through that again. Everybody in favour? Unanimous. Thank you for that, Neil. Thank you, everybody. Okay, next item on the agenda is...
Am I needed for this vote for quorum or no? All right, thank you.
Thank you for giving us the option, Craig. Next item on the agenda is land to the south of Puddler's Corner roundabout, Genesis Way concert, which is submission of reserved matters, which is a combination in relation to the construction of a new community hospital and associated energy centre, which is a combination of two applications brought together, and Louise is going to do the presentation for this. Over to you, Louisa.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the red line boundary for the site for this hospital phase. This aerial photograph shows the site in context. The application site forms part of an agricultural field to the south and west of the A692 Rotary Way, Concert Road, southwest of Concert Town Centre. You can see woodland encircling the wider site to the east, west, south and partly to the north. Puddler's Corner roundabout lies to the northern part of the application site and provides wider vehicle access to the rest of Concert and beyond. The northern boundary to the A692 is more open, and the A692 to the north starts to descend on its route to the Grove, Castleside westward. The field remains relatively level, and so the application site appears elevated from views along the A692 and further north, including Tesco and Starbucks opposite the site. To the south of the site is the C2C cycle route with the Terrace Novalis sculptures positioned to artificial high ground to the east of the site. Houndsgill Industrial Estate lies beyond the railway path to the south. We've got Hermiston Retail Park and housing located northeast across the public highway. The site historically formed part of the wider former Concert Steel Works that was cleared and restored in 1980 to 1982. So these photographs were taken within the site looking north and from Tesco's to the northwest looking east. And this photograph here is taken from the Terrace Navalis sculptures looking west towards the site. As some concerns have been raised on highway grounds by members and the public, and as it had been some time since the outline approval, I thought it was worthwhile taking you through some of the approved highway works that were approved for the outline application for the overall scheme as a reminder. So this plan and photograph indicates the approved signalised junction access of the A692 into the site. These photographs show the two roundabout areas at the Chequers and Delves Lane roundabouts that will be subject of road widening works. The left photograph shows the approach to Villarreal roundabout, where the left lane is to become for left only, heading towards the town centre. And to resolve the issue with traffic backing up onto Puddlers Corner roundabout during peak McDonald's trading hours, the entrance there will have a yellow box junction installed to keep the access clear. So this plan details the site layout. The hospital building is proposed adjacent to the A692 towards Castleside and would have a southwestern orientation with the main southwestern entrance, although there is a secondary pedestrian entrance on the northeastern elevation facing the Hermiston Retail Park. The associated energy centre building that would serve the hospital would be located to the south of the hospital. The hospital layout involves a simple rectangular building centred around two courtyards. Parking and landscaped areas are located to the south and west of the buildings, and the main access road into the site is subject of a separate infrastructure reserve matter application that has just been submitted. Vehicle access from this road will be in three separate locations. We've got a main vehicular access on the western boundary, a secondary access on the southern boundary, and a further access on the southern boundary for the service yard. Parking for all modes of transport have been carefully arranged to ensure that each user group is able to park near the relevant building entrances, specifically accessible parking and parent and child parking bays. The proposed parking layout incorporates several electric vehicle charging points and has been designed to facilitate future expansion of these. The proposals include a patient drop-off pickup zone and cycle parking areas for both visitors and members of staff. We have ambulance parking bays located at the main entrance and adjacent the urgent care entrance for ease of use. A supplementary standby bay is provided to the north of the building to act as a remote hub at the hospital, and a discrete place for a private ambulance is also provided to the north of the building. Turning to the detail of the hospital, the main hospital operations will be over 2 floors. So the ground floor will incorporate an outpatients ward, urgent care centre, family health clinic, audiology and diagnostics clinics. The first floor will house an inpatients ward with 16 beds, a chemotherapy and medical investigations unit, a rehabilitation unit, and orthoptics department. So we've got some elevation details of the hospital building and energy centre here. The proposed hospital building would be 2 to 3 stories in height and would be constructed in buff brick, concrete and metal. The design includes contemporary architecture with large areas of glazing, open interiors in common spaces, flat roofs and sustainable design features. The building design would incorporate passive design solutions, air source heat pumps, and the roof would also include photovoltaics. The Energy Centre is a simple 2-storey building located immediately to the south of the hospital and would accommodate the main heating and domestic hot water plant, mains water storage tanks, a substation, a generator and medical gases plant. The Energy Centre external roof space is proposed to source air source heat pump equipment. So we've got a visualisation here from across the site showing how the hospital would look in the context of the surrounding proposed development. And we've got some elevations here detailing the entrance and how the materials and landscaping would appear. So turning to consultation and representations, there have been no objections from statutory and internal consultees, subject to conditions where appropriate. There have been 2 representations in total from the public, both objecting on the grounds that the end parking bays will be difficult to manoeuvre into and out of, that the original sustainability statement referred to gaining heat powered by the energy park subject of an appeal, and that any future connections could disrupt local amenities such as the sea-to-sea route. That the hospital should not rely on external sources for energy as it should be incorporated into the design. There are difficulties with ensuring a cohesive design as the overall development is in phases, the traffic impacts to Puddlers Corner roundabout, and that the landowner should sell the lease to NHS to reduce NHS costs. These issues have all been addressed in the report. So to conclude, the principle of development and its access have already been approved. The appearance of the hospital and energy centre are considered acceptable, subject to conditions to ensure approval of details of any external plant. The layout is acceptable in terms of design and pedestrian and vehicle movements. The scale is justified due to clinical functional requirements and respects the character of the area. A comprehensive landscaping scheme meets landscape and ecology policy requirements. The traffic flows remain consistent with the outlined stage assessment, and therefore no further improvement works are required. The details submitted to discharge conditions 5, 7, 9, 10, 11 and 12 are satisfactory. However, further conditions are necessary to ensure that appropriate connections are in place to an improved wider site drainage system before the hard standing works are complete, and to restrict the discharge rate from the hospital site. The proposals have generated minimal public interest. Concerns expressed regarding the proposals have been taken into account and carefully balanced against the scheme's wider benefits. The proposed development is considered to broadly accord with the relevant policies of the County Durham Plan and relevant sections of the MPPF, and therefore approval is recommended. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Louisa. We have 3 registered speakers, 2 local members. The first one to speak is Councillor Dominic Haney. Dominic, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I represent the area that it's going to be actually built in, but obviously it serves the whole of Consett, the wider area. I know how important the hospital is to people locally. It might have generated minimal public interest in this particular application, but I don't know how widely the consultation documents were disseminated. But anyway, I can tell you it's one of the key issues in the local area. I was born there. My gran was a nurse in the intensive treatment unit. So again, I know how important this is. And the hospital's future's been in doubt for decades. So I'm pleased that a firm plan's now in place and that elected members here are going to be given an opportunity to have their say on the plans, because a full public consultation on the hospital didn't go ahead despite being promised. The existing facilities, in desperate need of either a refurbishment or a replacement facility such as this. Some residents would prefer a refurb, others see the benefits of a new facility, which on balance, I think I'd be minded that this might be an improvement with a little caveat which will come later. So the facilities, local members have been assured that most services will either be improved or maintained as is. But the one sticking point that's very contentious is bed numbers, which are inadequate. I think people are disappointed and many are frankly angry that there's only going to be 16 beds at this facility. There was originally talk of 24 beds, or at some point there was talk of 24 beds, and that should be an absolute minimum. But if there is scope for this site to be expanded in future to incorporate more beds, then I think it should be supported, because the planning statement admits that North West Durham's had the highest population growth of County Durham, and I believe it says, and even in the whole North East. When Shotley Bridge closed, the original hospital was closed or downgraded from a full hospital to a community hospital, and Dryburn was changed into UHND. I'm told that there was fewer beds overall than those 2 hospitals combined, so we're already starting at a bed deficit. The change from a general hospital to a community hospital has been a source of sadness. But anyway, you know, it's no wonder that we have a bed issue in the local NHS. But anyway, I know the committee can't really adjudicate on bed numbers and services provided. So the planning considerations, chief amongst them would be the proximity to the incinerator, which again, I don't really think the committee can make a decision on. Hopefully the Secretary of State does the right thing and rejects that later this month, I believe. But the highways issue is the one that people have repeatedly raised because of the A692 and the Puddlers Corner roundabout, which is a source of local, well, controversy anyway in terms of how safe it is. But I do think that the improvements that have been recommended as part of this scheme are, on the whole, pretty good, and hopefully it'll improve things across the board in that area. So I see no reason why the committee shouldn't approve the application. I would support that, and whilst I'll never be convinced that the bed numbers is enough, Consett does need an improved community hospital, which this is, and I'm hopeful that in the future it might even be expanded. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dominic, for them valid points. I also, when I seen the bed numbers, I did think they were small. However, as you rightly said, it's not for the committee. You know, that's not that decision, our decision. However, maybe the trust might be able to allude to that. Next we have Councillor Kevin Early, who's in attendance as a local member from a neighbouring ward. Kevin, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. I think Dominic should be more enthusiastic about pinching the hospital. Because, you know, for the people who are representing our ward, you know, it's a big loss just even losing it a mile and a half away. But I think in terms of the support group stuff, and we had a survey online, we had about 1,000 replies, and we actually proposed this site. Once we understood the position we were in, that you're always going to be in difficulty redeveloping the site, the existing site. You would always run the risk of losing services if you went through that. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's about access for people to use the service. In the middle of Consett, it's a lot more sensible than tucked in the corner of Shotley Bridge, even though it's got the crackinest best views of any hospital in the north. It has to be where it is. And, you know, I was at the meeting with members of staff who prioritised the site back in those heady days before incinerators and pandemics and more to the point, reductions in bus services, because I'm a little bit my concern here is I thought initially we were going to get a bus turning circle into the site, which would help. I would ask whether officers and members in other committees perhaps, when if money does appear for bus services, that we actually look in the round at helping to facilitate that, because I read the transport thing report, the access report thing, and it's a lovely document, but it fails to notice some fairly basic points that half of Consett is on a hill. Most of the people who access the hospital are, you know, not well or elderly, and nobody is going to be walking the average 3,000 metres or whatever the figure is in the transport plan uphill to a hospital on a rainy day if you're not well. You're going to get in the car. But you might just get in the bus if we actually have buses working and dropping you off at the door. So I'm making a plea about whether that could be kept in mind, Chair, but otherwise happy to support, although sadly saying farewell to our own little hospital.
Many thanks for that, Kevin. Appreciate your comments, and maybe Louise or both, Phil as well. Louise want to touch on the valid comment, especially about the bus situation.
Yes, in terms of sort of bus services to the site, obviously this is a reserve matters application, and the impacts aren't significantly different to what was you know, assessed at outline application stage, and it wasn't deemed necessary at that stage for there to be 106 funding to secure bus services. However, as part of the highways improvement works, we have secured 2 bus stops outside of the site on that A692 road. It's my understanding as part of the wider site, so not this hospital site, but the actual wider site, that the plan was for there to be a turn and circle for a bus to eventually turn into that once the overall site's been developed. But that would be subject to a further reserve matters application that's coming in. Is there anything that you'd like to add, Phil?
I think I would just like to add that a commercial service generally wouldn't do that manoeuvre because of the cost and the time implications involved. Now, clearly, if the NHS themselves had any kind of service that they ran, then that could go in there if there were a turning circle, but it is highly unlikely that even with a turning circle in there, that a commercial service would deviate from the main road to go into there. Although I'd completely appreciate why it would be a good thing.
I'll come to you just now. I'm just going to bring in the gentleman from the Trust, is Richard Morris. Richard, over to you, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks. I'm Richard Morris. I'm Deputy Director of Operations for the Acute Trust, so County Durham and Darlington Foundation Trust. The Reserve Matters application provides details of the proposed community hospital you've seen at Shotley Bridge. It relates to layout, scale, appearance, access, landscaping, and follows the outline consent granted for the wider site in February 2020. This was later amended in June 2022. The outline consent permitted a range of uses, including a community hospital and pharmacy, a sheltered care unit, a residential unit, a gym and wellbeing centre, a hotel, a public house, a microbrewery and a vet's practice. The principle of the development of the site for community hospital is firmly established through the outline planning approval. The replacement hospital on the site in concert will replace the ageing healthcare facility at Shotley Bridge with a high quality, fit for purpose new facility that will meet the needs of the local population in North Durham. Government funding through the new hospital programme has been allocated to the development with the expectation of being built by 2025. National planning encourages planning decisions to achieve healthy, inclusive and safe places which enable and support healthy lifestyles, especially where this would address identified local health and wellbeing needs. It goes on to note that planning decisions should take into account and support the delivery of local strategies to improve health, social, culture and wellbeing for all sections of the community. The hospital clearly fulfills these aims. We note Councillor Haney's concerns regarding highways and access. However, the principle of the new junction onto the 692 and the capacity and safety of that junction was established by the outline planning application. The Reserve Matters application has assessed the layout and access arrangements of the proposed hospital development. Further, the highway safety and junction capacity has been assessed as acceptable at outline stage. The submitted transport statement concludes that it will not result in unacceptable severe impacts, and as such this development is acceptable in terms of highways. The Highway Development Management Team has no objections to the proposals. Development proposals which enhance medical facilities and provide community and social infrastructure to cater for the needs of existing communities and future populations are clearly supported in the planning policy at all levels, and therefore the principle of this development is not only acceptable but strongly supported. I'll just touch on some of the benefits. So these are following extensive public engagement over a number of years. The scope of the Shotley Bridge Community Hospital development has been modelled around the current and future provision of clinical services that complement and support the wider healthcare system, not just in County Durham but across the whole of the integrated care system. North West Durham has seen the highest rate of population growth, higher than that of County Durham and the North East as a whole. In addition, 70% of the key poor health and disease indicators are worse in North West Durham than the rest of England. This demographic and disease profile support the need for maintaining and improving local access to health and services to the population of North West Durham. The clinical strategy has been developed with a rigorous review of existing clinical services at Shotley Bridge Community Hospital. It's been informed by the former clinical commissioning group as part of the commissioning intentions and more recently by the integrated care system. It's specifically aligned with the County Durham and Darlington Foundation Trust's key plan to deliver safe, compassionate and joined up care. There is significant public interest. there is significant public interest in maintaining local services. The clinical model has been entirely delivered by clinical teams looking at both the now and the future provision of services. The substantial on-site biodiversity net gains delivered on the site through proposed landscaping scheme will create additional habitats in the area to tie in biodiversity for the master plan. The development will result in the creation of a high-quality, sustainable building in terms of energy efficiency and sustainable construction, with focus on net zero. In summary, it is considered that the proposed development will result in substantial public benefits. In addition, as outlined in the planning submission documents, the proposals are compliant with relevant policies in the adopted local plan and the NPPF, and have an officer's recommendation for approval. Therefore, I would ask that the members of the Planning Committee vote in favour of the officer's recommendation and grant planning permission for this really important development. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Richard. Louise, anything else to add? No. And now we'll move over to the committee. Patricia, you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that this has been going on for so many years now that it's just wonderful that we've got this far, because every delay that we have on this planning application is costing more money, and it needs to be a viable proposition. And from the Health Committee's point of view, I really want to see this now. Get on with it. Let's get it built for the people of Consett and the surrounding areas, because it is that, you know, it's so lovely to have a local facility, and so that's what I've got to say. And I hope I'd like to recommend that we approve this.
Thank you, Patricia. Cathy, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with everything Patricia's just said. I'd like to second it, but also I'd like to say I'm really pleased with the road infrastructure changes. On the whole, I think it's a really good piece of work. That's it. Yeah, so I second that.
Thank you, Cathy. Any further comments from the committee? If not, we've got a proposer and a seconder. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. That's unanimous. Application is carried. And on that concludes today's business, and thank you everybody for attending today's meeting. Thank you.